everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I want to ask you to please remember to like and share these videos if you enjoy what I do, and so others can also find them. And also, please remember to subscribe to the channel. And make sure you click that little notification bell so you can be notified of my next uploaded videos. This week in history, we're going to talk about the Niagara Movement. We're going to learn a little bit about it and see how it inspired the start of the NAACP. And we're going to be reading from the Pennsylvania Capital Star for an article that was written by Michael Cord. July 11th makes 118 years since the Niagara Movement was founded in 1905. The Niagara Movement forcefully demanded equal economic opportunity for Black men and women. The movement was founded by W.E.B. Du Bois, one of America's greatest intellectual sociologists and authors, and William Monroe Trotter, who was one of America's greatest intellectual anti-accommodationists and newspaper publishers. Together, they created the organization, and along with Frederick McGee and Charles Edwin Bentley, held its first meeting with 25 other influential pro-Black activists in attendance at the Erie Beach Hotel near Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. The Niagara Movement, which named itself after Niagara Falls to represent the mighty current of economic and civil rights change that it would bring about, rejected the strategy of the widely known Booker T. Washington, who it accused of being too accommodating to racist white folks who persuaded Washington not to pursue voting rights. In a historic 1895 speech that came to be known as the Atlanta Compromise, Washington, who was financed by anti-trade union robber baron, industrialist, multimillionaire Andrew Carnegie, said blacks shouldn't concern themselves with politics, but only with learning a trade and creating businesses. But the Niagara Movement members in general, and Trotter in particular, blasted Washington as naive and short-sighted. While they agreed with his approach to vocational training and job creation, they realized that much more was required. That's why they also advocated for academic education and for voting rights. They took the enlightened position that without an intellectual foundation and without progressive laws created by progressive officials who were elected by Black voters, a Black person's trade and a Black person's business could be stolen easily without any legal or political recourse whatsoever. Trotter's righteous opposition to Washington was so intense that in 1903, Trotter physically confronted him in Boston and was arrested on minor charges. Trotter and the Niagara Movement clearly understood that financial so-called security is actually temporary if it can't be intellectually, legally, and politically defended. At its inaugural July 11, 1905 meeting, the Niagara Movement drafted a declaration of principles that called for the increase of intelligence, the buy-in of property, the advance in literature, and the demonstration of constructive and executive ability in the conduct of great economic and educational institutions. As documented by the W.E.B. Du Bois Library at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, Niagara Movement chapters were established in 21 states, a mere 2 months following conclusion of that July 1905 meeting. In August of 1906, when the second meeting was held, this time in the United States at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, where Brother John Brown had done his thing in 1859, women were invited. And it was so successful that Du Bois described it as one of the greatest meetings that American Negroes ever held. It was such a powerful meeting, such a powerful event, and such an especially powerful sight that, as noted in the Niagara Movement at Harper's Ferry article by David T. Gilbert of the National Park Services, a highlight for those gathered was John Brown's Day, It was a day devoted to honoring his memory. At 6 a.m., a silent pilgrimage began to John Brown's fort. The members removed their shoes and socks as they tread upon the hallowed ground where the fort stood. The assemblage then marched single file around the fort singing John Brown's Body. In 1906, the Niagara Movement had grown to some 170 members in 34 states. It also had some state-level success, including lobbying against the legalization of segregated railroad cars in Massachusetts. Sadly, in that same year, Dubois and Trotter had a falling out regarding the decision to allow women in the organization. Although Dubois was for it, Trotter was initially against it but later acquiesced. And to make matters worse, the Niagara Movement could not gain much national momentum and suffered from limited financial resources and determined opposition from the nationally popular Booker T. Washington and his ardent supporters, as well as that internal disagreement between Dubois and Trotter, which caused Trotter to officially resign shortly afterward. Dubois led the 1907 meeting, which took place in Boston with 800 attendees and focused on ending federal Jim Crow laws. But the absence of Trotter and his backers, who together had left to found a new organization, the Negro American Political League, was palpable. Unfortunately, when the 1908 meeting took place in Oberlin, Ohio, the turnout was much smaller and dissension had become rampant throughout the organization. In 1909, the meeting there was even smaller, and attendance at the 1910 meeting, which took place at Sea Isle City, New Jersey, was so minimal that it was the last in the Niagara Movement's history. But the ideals of Dubois and Trotter's Niagara Movement didn't end with its final meeting. Its ideals of economic activism in combination with political activism and educational activism were resurrected in the founding of the NAACP on February 12, 1909. Before becoming a founding member of NAACP, W.E.B. Du Bois was already well known as one of the foremost black intellectuals of his era, the first black American to earn a Ph.D. from Harvard University. Du Bois published widely before becoming NAACP's Director of Publicity and Research and starting the organization's official journal, The Crisis, in 1910. He challenged the position held by Booker T. Washington that Southern blacks should compromise their basic rights, including voting rights, in exchange for vocational education. Under Du Bois' guidance, the Crisis Journal attracted a wide readership reaching 100,000 in 1920 and drew many new supporters to the NAACP. With Du Bois as its mouthpiece, the NAACP came to be known as the leading protest organization for Black Americans. The Niagara Movement was right in rejecting an accommodationist approach and in advocating for economic wealth backed by intellectual, voting, and political power. This article did a great job of describing the creation, the rise, and the fall of the Niagara Movement and how it inspired the creation of the NAACP. And if you are interested in reading this article for yourself, I will have the link in the description box below. And, although the NAACP today does not really fight for black people like it did back then, and it doesn't seem to me to stand for what it originally started out as, it really did serve its purpose at the time, and it did help to propel the rights of black people, and it really served its purpose for the time. It's just unfortunate that it is not today what it started out as, or even evolved to something else that could really help its people in this country fight for its rights. Instead, it seems to me that they fight for everyone else and they've left us behind. But again, if you're interested in reading this article, the link will be in the description box. And this is one of the significant events that occurred in our history this week. As always, thank you for watching. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you soon.